Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This is Leadership Podcast, your intersection between growth and leadership. And on this gloomy Saturday morning in North Bay, Ontario, Canada, and New York as well. Welcome, Mary Howard to the podcast. I'm so happy you are here. So let me tell you, for the people listening, a little bit about Mary. So Mary is a nationally board certified teacher and teaches 6th grade ELA and science in Grand Island, New York. So Mary believes passionately in the potential that technology has for reaching and engaging all learners. In pursuit of this passion, she has published numerous educational technology articles and has provided webinars on virtual environments, virtual reality, 3D design, QR codes, and digital engagement strategy. Mary's accolades include recognition as the 2018 International Society for Technology and Education's Virtual Pioneer of the Year. Wow. And 3 Silver Presidential Volunteer Service Awards. That is great. Congratulations, Mary. She was a New York State Teacher of the Year finalist for 2018 and 2020 as well, and is a New York State Master Teacher. When Mary isn't elbows deep in her technology initiatives, she is a mother of 3 boys and devotes her free time to playing hockey, refereeing as well, youth hockey, and volunteering within the hockey community. She is an avid runner, Adirondack 46er, and recently cycled across New York State on the Erie Canal. Wow. Mary, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Really glad to be here.
So we were chatting a little bit before the recording, and you're up in New York, so we're in the same time zone, and it seems like we're following the same pattern for weather as well.
Oh, for sure. Yep.
So lots of rain forecasted over in your end for a few days, and it's the same thing here. So we said, we were talking last night, back and forth, talking through emails, and you were absolutely right. In gloomy weather, what better thing to do than to meet new people, have a conversation, record a podcast with a good cup of coffee on a Saturday morning.
There will be no hiking or biking or running today, more than likely, with the rain.
No, not unless you like getting all wet. But we're going to avoid that this morning and just have a really great conversation around, technology, around chatbots. I'm really looking forward to getting into that. Mary, we were talking before the recording, and I was saying how those conversations are starting, in our board, in particular with ChatGPT, of course, because that's one of the first ones that came out that was popularized the most. So, how we can leverage, the power of artificial intelligence in classrooms. So I'm anxious to get into that with you so that I can actually bring some of that back to my teachers in my school board. So that would be great. But before we get into it, and your book, you're also a brand new author of a book published through X Factor. Yeah, you got it right in front of you there for the people looking on YouTube. That's awesome. We're going to be touching on that book because I think it's a great resource for schools and teachers that are looking for information and ideas. But before we get into that, Mary, I know I read some information on your bio, but if you can tell us a little bit more about yourself so that the people can get to know you, that'd be fantastic.
Sure. Yes. As you said, I am a 6th grade teacher. And if you're not familiar with Grand Island, my fair way to describe Grand Island is it is a pork chop shaped island.
Okay.
Just shy of Niagara Falls, New York. So
So
that
you're
is,
close. Okay.
I am relatively close to you. Yeah, that's probably why our weather patterns are similar.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've taught 6th grade for my entire career, 20 years, and love it. I love the students and I love teaching 6th grade. And I think what drew me the most to technology in general was the fact that you have to be a weirdo to teach weirdos, because 6th graders, they're crazy. They're wonderful. They're loving, but they're just,
it's a great crazy.
Is a great crazy. And so you have to do things that are engaging and dynamic to keep them listening and learning. And so that is what drew me to ed tech in the first place. And so I've just always been involved in ed tech, as you heard, going to conferences and sharing, but it all came from a place of, I need to keep these kids listening and interested and engaged. And I've always felt like ed tech was a big part of that.
I think that's great. I'm always looking for different ways that we can provide engaging, lessons and activities to students. They're human like us. When we think about us and our work, we like to do stuff and be involved in stuff that engages us as well. So, the students aren't any different than that. So, okay. So we talked about how you played hockey
Yeah.
And I was telling you how we're also a hockey family, and I've talked about it many times on the podcast. And you've got like a similar path, and your kids are done playing hockey now, and so are mine. Mine are older now, so my son's grade. My son is 20 years old now. He's off in college, and my daughter's in grade 12. She'll be graduating. So empty nesters in September here for
Yay.
us. Yeah,
Yes,
absolutely.
nice. Nice.
Absolutely. But I did not know until I read the bio that you also referee.
I
Wow.
do.
So I know you play. So you play
Yep.
recreational hockey. I think that is really awesome. Is it like a co-ed team, or is it just like a women's team, or?
It's all women's, and we're a really tight group, and we travel all over New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, New Jersey, and go to different tournaments. And a lot of times they're fundraisers. Just last weekend we were
Really?
at Pucks for Paws, which was in Clifton Park, Saratoga area,
Okay.
New York. And the money we play games. There's 4 games in a weekend, but the money for the tournament goes to good charities and good causes. So
Wow.
yeah, it's a nice thing to do. And
So
it's a great group of friends.
yeah, so not only for fun, but you're actually, having an impact and doing fundraisers. Wow.
Yeah,
I think that's really awesome. And it's funny because you're actually the second woman on the podcast that I've interviewed that plays hockey.
that's
Because
awesome.
when I did the series on the book Disrupt the Status Quo, with the authors Daphne McMenemy,
Yeah.
she's a goaltender.
No, I
Yes,
didn't even know that, and I know
yes,
her. That is so funny.
yes, she plays hockey, and she'll often post some pictures on, especially on, I think, Facebook or Twitter, and she's
Yeah,
all like decked out in her goalie equipment. So
that's
she plays also.
hysterical.
I think that's great. Now, refereeing youth hockey. So when you say youth hockey, so what age range are we looking at here usually that you'll ref?
Well, I'm certified for level 3, so I could do quite high levels, but I
Okay.
choose not to. I really like to do the age group that I teach for the most part, because there's nothing funnier than coming to center ice, getting ready to drop the puck, and looking up and see, one of your students spot you, and they're like, "Mrs. Howard, is
Oh
that
my
you?"
God.
So
Yeah.
usually we call the levels bantam
Yep.
or pee-wee,
Yep.
so it's 13U, 12U,
Yeah.
kind of right in that zone for the most part.
And you hit where I wanted to go with that, because I was hoping you were going to say it's the same age group as the kids that you teach,
Yeah.
because yeah, I was going to say like that, the effect that must have. It's like, when you're a teacher and you meet your students in the mall or in the shopping center, or outside of school, especially the younger ones, right? And they're all amazed, like, oh my God, you live outside of the
That's for
school.
real life? Like what? It
Yeah,
is.
but so I'm curious to know, like, the fact that you ref some of the games, like what kind of an impact or influence does that have on the relationships that you develop with your students, knowing, when they see you in that context and then you come back in the classroom?
It's terrific, like, and even students that aren't my own that are in the building, you're like, oh, you're that ref, there definitely is an instant connection, and a lot of it is role modeling, honestly, especially for girls. I went to an all girls game not that long ago, and literally there you heard this cheer erupt on the bench, because it was like, it's a lady ref, it's a lady ref, like they were so excited, to kind of see females in the sport. So
Yeah,
that was a neat experience
I
too.
mean, that's great. So the youth hockey that you do ref, is it just girls hockey, or is it boys hockey as well?
It's co-ed. It's
It's co-ed. It's
any.
everything. It's
Yeah.
everything. I think that's great, and I would imagine that if ever you've got one of your students from your class when they're playing and they're not happy with one of your calls, how do they react to that?
They're pretty respectful about it, because there's no one likes refs, no ref calls a game ever. Everybody's critical of what you do, so no, they're pretty good about it. I'll be like, hey, how was the game? How'd I
Yeah.
do? And well, that one call, and they're all sheepish about it. So they're funny about it. Yeah.
I think that's great. And at that age, especially, right, we're looking to even more, to develop relationship with them. I've my first 3 years of teaching were in grade 7 and 8, and the first school that way back in 2006 that I was principal of, for 3 years, was actually a grade 7 and 8 school with about 200 students. So it's a great level to be teaching at. I loved it. I enjoyed my years as well, but that relationship piece where you need to you try to find different ways to connect to them, that's when it starts to get a little bit more complex. I find that's my opinion, of course. It gets a little bit more complex than when they're younger, in grade 1, 2, 3, where you're getting the hugs and it's just unconditional, right? Unconditional love when they're a little smaller. But as we age, of course, human beings, we develop our personalities, and we start to discover the world, and we start to get our own opinions. So when you get up to, in those teen years, it's a little bit more complex. So we always look for different ways to be able to connect with them. And if that can be, and if you can find stuff that's outside of school, that's even more powerful, I find.
For
To be
sure.
able to, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about tech, because and we're gonna get into your book. We're gonna showcase that book, and for the people that will be interested in wanting to know how they can get their hands on your book, Mary. Well, on my website, of course, I'll have a page for you, and in that page we'll have all the information. So for the people listening, guys, you just need to get on down to inspireleadership.ca in the podcast section, and we'll have all the show notes there, and Mary's contacts as well, and ways for you to buy the book. So you know what, let's start with that. So your book, which was published recently, I believe, through X Factor. So the book's called Artificial Intelligence to Streamline Your Teacher Life, the ChatGPT Guide for Educators, and very timely. So chatbots, the big buzz right now. Everybody's talking about it. I use it and I
Yeah.
love it. I am leveraging the heck out of ChatGPT for the work that I do,
Do it.
not only within my full-time job as a principal, as a systemic principal in my school board, but as well for my consulting business in leadership development. So Mary, let's talk a little bit about the book. Tell us how it came about. How did it come about that you wanted to write this book, and what are the reasons behind it?
Sure. That, if you're familiar with ChatGPT at all, you know that it hasn't been around that long. It's not even been, I don't think it's quite 6 months old.
Yeah.
For me, I discovered it back in December, and in December, teachers are off. We have a little bit more time. And I've always been an ed tech advocate, always loved new and shiny things, kind of been drawn to those ed tech things.
Yeah.
And I heard about this ChatGPT thing. So I started to play with it, started to dabble with it, just like probably you did. And realized, oh wow, what this could do for a teacher in their teacher life, how this could elevate us and help us streamline our lives. So I started to play with it. And I think my first encounters with it were just asking, like most people do, we start to have a conversation with it.
Yeah.
It's a chatbot. You can have a dialogue back and forth with it. And then I was like, well, let's test how smart it is. And that's when it started returning, reading passages that were accurate, related to my science content. And then reading passage turned into reading passage plus multiple choice questions, and
Wow.
reading passage, multiple choice questions, answer key. And it kept growing and growing and growing. And that's when that moment arrived. Oh my goodness, this is a book. This is it. This is the thing I want to write the book about. And so then I plugged away at a book, outlined it, wrote about 6 or 7 chapters. And that's when I reached out to X Factor and Codebreakers, and they were with me in terms of, yes, we've got something here. Let's get
Mhm.
this thing published.
And they're great. Matthew Joseph over at X Factor, and Brian Aspinall, of course, over at Codebreaker. Great group. I got to tell you, Mary, when I discovered ChatGPT, it was my superintendent of education. We're in the same office area, and he came over and he says, "Hey, have you heard about this?" I said, "No," and then he shows it to me, and my reaction to it, I can't remember the last time. It was like this huge aha moment. I was like, oh.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and when I started using it, and I go, oh, I my goodness, the potential of this. And I can't remember the last time something like a piece of technology or something, in education in particular, gave me that kind of reaction where I felt like I got to get out there. I got to see how I can leverage this. I got to show this to the principals, and we got to get on this because the potential is just unbelievable. So it created this buzz and this excitement because of the potential of it, and how we could all leverage it as a very powerful tool, not just in education but everywhere. So, and I'm a glass half full kind of guy. So of course, I'll see, all the positive potentials, because
Yes.
we all know that, some people will be wary at first, and they'll take more the approach of, what are the risks, and it's important to be able to talk about risks, but the potential and the leverage that I've been seeing, and as it's being used in classrooms and teachers, and the discussions we're having with them, it's just unbelievable. So I think that your book is really timely when it comes to chatbots and education.
Well, you touched upon something that was, definitely important to me as I was writing. And that's just it. I'm with you. I'm a glass half full. I see the
Yeah.
potential in things. And, as I said before, anything, that we can use in the classroom. And as I was writing the book, it was very important to keep that lens focused on how can this assist the teacher? How can this assist the educator in the classroom, from a productivity standpoint, from a utilization standpoint. I wasn't ready to go into, the implications of student use
Yeah.
and, how can we use it with students? I talk about it a little bit, but because it is new, and because it is, just out there, I think we need to pause and sort of look at how it can be used and spend more time evaluating that. So really the book is 100% written from leveraging what you can do as an educator to use it. And it gives so many use case examples.
Yeah. So, if we're looking for, ways and how we can leverage it, well, in the book's a great start, of course, and we'll link that up to the website for sure. And I think it's the same thing, right? We took the same approach, so we're still discovering it, and we're not promoting it in our schools in terms of, kids, our students actually signing up. We're not there yet, well, but we are in that exploration stage where, how can we, the adults, um, really get to know exactly what it is and how
Mhm.
we can use it and in which ways. And then, and I know in your book you talk about discovering also the risk as we go, and because it does bring some unexpected challenges, right? You talk about that in your book, I think. So those are all things that I think that as educators, when we have a new tool like that that's presented to us, I think it's important for us to really dive in and see, well, how can it be leveraged? How can we use it as a powerful tool, to help us develop engaging activities, and all sorts. The sky's the limit. I can name so many things, but ChatGPT, for example, or the chatbots, they can do it most all of it. So the potential is just unbelievable. And I think what's going to be really important for us where we're at in our board are the conversations. So we
Mhm.
started having the conversations around chatbots and ChatGPT in particular. Our teachers are starting to discover it. Some of them are experiencing with it. Fact checking as well, because we know that it's not always 100% accurate. The information that it provides is dated up to a certain time, but all in all, I think it's information that is mostly accurate. But they're aware of that. But we're just in that phase where we're looking at the potential of it, and how can it help me as, I don't know, a grade 12 chemistry teacher, a grade 4 language teacher. How, if I'm looking for a text for my students in languages, and I'm looking for a text that's diversified and that has different elements, and I'm having a hard time finding one, well, it might be interesting to, log into your ChatGPT account and ask ChatGPT to actually compose a text with
Yeah.
those, with those elements inside of it. So those are actually things that our teachers are experimenting with, and they're just being blown away. They're being
Yeah.
blown away with what is being produced and the ideas. And so that's been a really interesting an interesting, how can I say it? An interesting struggle.
Revelation.
I think I'll say it like that. An interesting struggle, is that learning phase, and to see how we can use it. Now, I know there's a big question around, when you're using the information that's taken from ChatGPT, and is it actually plagiarism? I'm sure you've come across that. So I'd be interested to know Mary, what's your input when it comes to that?
I think there's a couple perspectives on it. As you were describing the use of it, the first thing that comes into my head every single time is adapt and modify, or modify and adapt. It's
Like that.
very rare, and I never actually have retrieved something from ChatGPT and copied and pasted it anywhere. It's
Hmm.
always adapted and modified, and that's because it's still, when I read the material and when I read what it writes, it's still very robotic. It sounds like a robot wrote it. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like there's no human voice in there, and so um, there is that fear though with students. I've seen many examples of students, not in my own classroom, but out there, of students literally not even reading what it produced, copying it and pasting it right into
Yeah.
their classwork. And even it says, as a language model, I'm not like, they even copy that part in there. Like, guys, you gotta read it. So a lot of people will say it's no different than the days where we had an encyclopedia and we opened up that encyclopedia and we used that information. We have to teach paraphrasing skills, and we have to teach, those skills, citation skills, to the students, just as we always have. But the temptation will be there. How can it not be there?
Absolutely. Makes me think of, the back in the days when the calculator watch first came out, and
Yeah.
all the math teachers were a little bit worried that
Oh,
during the test, we'd be I'm doing this for people on YouTube, they can see me, but the ones that are listening can't, so we try to hide our little calculator watch. But I think that's a great point, and we actually talked about that because one of the first things, if not the first thing that comes out when you start that conversation is, well, are the students just going to plagiarize, right? They're just going to
yeah.
copy and we're not going to know. And so as and I understand that. I understand that that teachers have that you know that they think about that first thing, and that they worry about it.
I
So
think they do need, and I think it's important to talk about the fact that teachers too, with any tech tool, if
absolutely.
there's a tool out there that can replace, that students can just search for an answer and put it in there, you're not asking the right questions. And I think there is a lot of onus on educators to make sure, the questions you're asking of students, you know, are elevated, that require reflection and require them to put themselves into whatever that response is. Because anybody can Google anything, and they always have been able to, so we do have to sort of adapt and change what we're doing in instruction as well.
Yeah, and we have to talk about it. So, and that's what we said. We said, even though we're not gonna, take our students in classroom and get them to open up accounts for all sorts of different reasons, it doesn't mean we can't talk to them about it. Because just because we're telling them, no, you can't create an account with your school email, doesn't mean they're not going to create an account. So they are going to
Exactly.
use it. So the conversations have to be made, and we've already started, uh, preparing different materials for teachers to use in terms of, how do I bring this on the table with the kids? What do I say? How do I talk about it? What do I need to talk about when it comes to chatbots? So the conversations with the kids are being had because they are using it. It doesn't matter if we're telling them you can't create an account with your school email; they're still going to use it, and it's important for us to have those conversations, as you said, because it's like any other tool that's come in the past where it was possible to use it in ways that you shouldn't be.
Yep.
It's important for us to teach them that we can't automatically assume, and that goes for the adults as well. We can't automatically assume that they're going to know how to use it the right way. You talked about paraphrasing and using it to generate ideas if you're looking to compose a text. So I think it's a great tool to be able to do that, but we need to have the conversations with the kids.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's so many ways that they can use it in productive ways that aren't just, spewing out information. They can take their own work and put it into ChatGPT and have it analyze it for word use and word choice and, rephrasing things, or how can I add a metaphor or a simile. So again, teaching them those accurate and more productive ways of using the tool, for sure.
And that's why we use the tools, right? Is to make us more efficient, more, we know that we already, our time is stretched. We're always short of time in education. So if we can leverage any kind of tool that enables us to do our work, especially the stuff that takes a little bit longer, and that's tedious, if these tools can help us to get to that end point a little faster, I think that we need to leverage it. Now, for the kids that are, using the chat bots in school, and what kind of feedback have you, because I imagine you've talked about it. Let's start with your grade 6 students, right? I'm sure you've had conversation with them about that. So what kind of reaction did you get from the kids? Because, and I'll say it like that, I've talked about it with my kids
Yeah.
and with some students in some of the schools when I do go into the schools, and some knew about it, but a lot of them didn't know about ChatGPT. And then when they knew about it, the reaction was similar to mine. But I'm curious from your perspective with the students in your school, what was the reaction to chatbots or ChatGPT when the kids realized what it was and that it exists?
I have I have a lot of answers to that question because yeah, it's been very interesting. Is I was very transparent with my students that I was using it when I was writing the book,
Yeah.
and they hadn't heard of it at first, and they were like, I said, a robot wrote this. This was written by ChatGPT. I was sharing a written example with them, and they were like, well, what's that? So there was a curiosity out there. They kind of wanted to know what it was. Those that had already discovered it and had been using it, it was instant guilt. It was really interesting to see.
Okay. Okay.
They were using it and they felt guilty. And it was kind of like, how does she know about this? I thought I had the perfect cheat tool. So
Yes.
that was kind of a funny reaction. And then older students, because I work with a lot of pre-service students, I work with a lot of student teachers.
Okay.
And like if I showed it to them or introduced it to them, their reaction was, it was actually kind of amazing, because pre-service students, there's nobody more stressed out than someone's at school learning how to be a teacher. It is kind of the most stressful time, in your life becoming an educator. And it was almost this kind of sigh of relief. And it wasn't as though they were given a cheat tool, but they were given kind of this, I always refer to it as a three-legged stool. It's a little bit wobbly, but it's going to support you a little bit and help you. And I always feel like that's the best way to look at it, is a three-legged stool. My son is a pre-service teacher right now. He's going to
Okay.
school for a science teacher. And, I said, this can help you make a rubric. Did you know that? And he's like, what? So he used it, got a rubric, but of course, edit it, modify it, make sure it fits what you need. So I think people's reactions are funny. Some of them get excited. Some of them who are using it feel a little bit guilty, so, but the students themselves definitely on the side of guilty. They were
Yeah.
like, oh no, she knows about this. Now what am I going to do?
They thought they had it over on us, but no, 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 no,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah.
You don't have it. Well, yeah. So, and I've noticed or observed, about the same kind of mixed reactions with students as well. But definitely some of them that are saying they figured us out. We thought we knew about this and it would stay on the lowdown, but no,
Yeah.
it didn't stay. It did not. It was the opposite of that. If I'm not mistaken, ChatGPT, I think, is like the fastest growing application or whatever you want to call it, that's since what is it,
TikTok.
TikTok,
That's it.
right?
Yeah.
So like you said, only 6 months old, but I don't know, like the millions and millions of people that have downloaded or have created accounts. So there's something there. And as a teacher, Mary, how have you been leveraging ChatGPT or chatbots? Can you give us a few examples, for the teachers that are listening to us and are looking at understanding and trying to like have a mental image of, how is it that I can use it? Can you give us a few examples?
Sure. Every day, I have to say, I have been using it every single day, not just in teacher life, but for many different things. And so I think the rubric is always the hook. A lot of people, rubrics are really hard to write, whether you're
Yeah.
writing a holistic or an analytical rubric or whatever type. And so, very much if I have a project or something that I'm using in the classroom, a rubric is a really wonderful thing that it can do for you. It's a time saver,
Mm,
absolutely. So that's a good example. And this is proposal season for those of us that, go to a lot of ed tech conferences or write a lot of grants. There are a lot of grant applications. So I was working on a grant application yesterday, and many times they ask you questions like, what are your objectives? Students will be able to kind of statements. And if you put in the prompt and you ask ChatGPT to, could you write me a few ideas for objectives for this particular
yeah.
lesson or for this particular thing. So I used it for a proposal that I was writing the other day for a grant to write me some objective statements. And then just in my classroom instruction, it's Teacher Appreciation Day next week. Every leader should know that. It's Teacher
You heard it
Appreciation
here,
Day
guys.
next week. And so I was kind of playing around with ChatGPT the other day, and I said, I'm a teacher and I want to feel appreciated. Could you write me a letter? And it wrote me a teacher appreciation letter. I was like, oh, thanks. I feel so special. So those are tiny little examples, but those are just three recent ones that I
And
did. I share a
I,
lot of those on my TikTok. I have a TikTok where I'm kind of almost every day sharing a
okay.
new
Okay.
ChatGPT example. So
Well, we'll be linking that up as well in the show notes, your TikTok account, so that people can connect. I like to get back to the guilty feeling, right? So we talked
yeah.
about the students, how they got that guilt because, oh my God, they know the secret and they know what we're using. But there's also I think a different kind of guilt. And it's maybe if I'm putting myself in a position of being, the adult or the teacher or the principal, do you find that if, for example, if if I want to build a rubric, or if I'm getting a keynote speech ready, for example, in my, in the work that I do, and I ask ChatGPT, to generate ideas and whatnot, and I'm using some of that. So do you find that some people are feeling like some kind of a form of guilt because they're not ideas that are generated from themselves, but they're generated from ChatGPT?
I think for sure. I absolutely, and my pre-service teachers that I've been working with too, I think that's sort of like I give it to them and there's just this little bit like, I should be doing this myself, but so yeah, there is a guilt. The most recent example I can think of is one of my students, a pre-service student, and she had to write some interview questions, and she used ChatGPT to help her. I think she did. She felt shh, don't tell anybody, but it's like, no, that's okay. It's like, oh, that's what the tool is there for. You're not cheating. It's supporting you.
And I think that's
Yeah.
a great point. It's and you've hit the nail on the head, is to realize that that's what exactly what the tool is there for, is to help us
Yeah.
generate ideas, and we're not going to have all the ideas, and sometimes we just need that spark to get us going. It doesn't mean that you're gonna copy paste, like we said a little while ago, the whole thing. But if we're looking to just generate ideas, for me, the way I look at it is that I can ask ChatGPT to generate some ideas, or I can ask a colleague as well. So for me, it's the same thing. I'm consulting a resource and asking it to generate some ideas in terms of what are the key elements on this theme of my keynote, for example. What should I touch on? What are the most important things? I can ask my colleagues, but I can also ask ChatGPT. So it's just like another a source of information that I have access to. That's the way I see it. And a good
Yeah.
analogy that I keep in my head is here at home we've got a Roomba robot vacuum. I don't know if you know those, the
I
little
have
round
one too.
ones.
I love it. I love my Roomba.
And
Yeah.
it's like, am I feeling guilty because I ain't the one that's cleaning the floors? No, no,
Oh,
no, no, no.
no, no, no.
So that's how I see it. Like the Chat GPT and the chat bots. Well, that's what it does. It's allowing me to be able to work more efficiently. And sure, maybe I'm not thinking about all the ideas, but if I ask it to generate ideas to do some of the work for me, and then there's one that really hits me, and I tell myself, you know what, I wouldn't have even thought about that. Well, how would I have felt if I would have asked the same question to a human colleague, and that colleague would have given me that idea, and I would have had the same reaction? Would I have felt less or more guilty? So that's the way I look at it, right? It's the important thing is that I have the idea, and then from there I built it myself.
And
That's
can
how I say.
and can share that idea. I think the analogy that you're using is really, it's an extension of our professional learning communities.
Oh, that's good. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to think of it. And for me, if I'm sitting at my desk and it's 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm preparing a lesson in science for the day, and we're talking about kinetic energy, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I need some examples of things that have kinetic energy. It's 6 in the morning, and I'm not going to call my colleagues, and I'm not going to be able to tweet it out and ask people for
Yeah,
help.
yeah.
And that's a good spot for Chat GPT. Give me some things in the world that I can use as examples of kinetic energy, or that demonstrate Newton's third law, or those types of things.
Yeah, exactly. So it could come in and help us out when, on demand, right? On
Yeah,
demand.
on
So
demand.
when we need it, it could be 10 o'clock at night. Hopefully it's not. It could be 6 o'clock in the morning, but whenever we do need it and we need to generate an idea, well, it's always there. It could be on our cell phone. It could be on our computers.
I think we're onto something. It's an on-demand professional learning community. I think we're onto something.
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I think so. Yeah, just like Twitter, you can jump on Twitter and get a whole bunch of stuff that you need, through hashtags and through different people that we
Yeah.
follow. But ChatGPT is the same thing. So
Yep.
we can just jump on it whenever we need to and ask it some questions, have some conversations, and maybe get something positive out of that, right?
Yes, for sure.
So for kids, so let's talk about the kids. Uh, Personally, I think the chat bots is huge. I think it's like a marking event in time. I think
Yes.
in the evolution of technology, and how it's going to change the world, and it already has, like, big time. Um, so how do you see it for kids? Because it's important to talk about it with the kids. I think it's going to be something that's going to have a big impact on their lives as well. So where do you see that going with the students, Mary? So is it important for schools, even though if a school decides, because I've seen posts all over the place where school districts have blocked it and banned it and whatnot, like a lot of other things. The first reaction is that, how important is it important at all for schools to be talking about this with kids, because of the impact that it can have potentially in their future jobs, or just in their future in general?
I think from a digital citizen perspective, I think it's extremely important. I've never been an advocate of block and ban, but it's just as you said, I think it's very important that schools are having these conversations. And if for no other reason other than the privacy concerns. We do not know what they're doing with this data. And my students are 12. They
Yeah,
should not be faking their birth dates, logging
that's
into
right.
a site like this, sharing their personal information, from, again, a digital citizenship perspective. And that has nothing to do with, their learning and they're cheating and anything else. That's just a safety aspect of it. We need to know more about what's happening with the data and the privacy concerns before we can move forward with it. Moving forward is going to be important because, as you said, it's revolutionary and it's going to change
Mm.
everything, and it's not going away. So we have to adapt, and we have to learn how to teach in our classrooms with the existence of this tool, because it's always going to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And if, for the people listening, if we do have some teachers out there that are thinking that maybe they'd like to start a conversation with their students, I know that there is a whole bunch of materials already available out there. Um, suggestions on topics of, of what to cover, how to start the conversation, what to say, what information you need. Heck, you can even log into your ChatGPT
Yes.
account and ask
Right.
ChatGPT to give you an outline of how you can, address that with the kids. So, but I agree. I think it's already had a huge impact. I think we haven't even seen the tip of the iceberg. It's
We
it's
do
it. Yeah, go ahead.
they do need to model effective use. And what really warms my heart are the number of educators that are out there seeing this tool, because my PLC is all, ed tech educators. We all
Yeah,
want to, yeah,
yeah,
adopt the tool. And there's a lot of teachers out there that are not just looking at it from a selfish perspective, like how can it help me in my life, but how can I teach students effective use? And what can I do in my classroom? And especially English teachers or English language arts teachers, it serves to be a replacement tool for writing. So we really do need to teach the students what to do with it to support writing in effective ways, in ways that are ethical, ways that are not copying the information out of it. So the best approach is going to be adopt the tool and model the tool for them so that they're not using it to replace their thought, especially
and
in writing.
and I think it's something that can end up making them better at what they're using it for.
For sure.
If I'm generating ideas and it's allowing me to be able to have some ideas, and then I take that and I make it my own. The student is doing the work. The student is writing, if it's writing that he's doing. So the student is using the tool to improve and get better at whatever it is that he's doing. So it's not, unless he's copying the whole text directly, then that's different. But
Right.
if it's just in terms of generating ideas and being able to get the work done after that, you're doing the work, right? So, and it's helping you out. And I think that we need to leverage any and all technologies that we can, and that would allow us to do that. But chatbots, I think it's revolutionary. I think it's going to be a mark in history, like I said,
Sure.
and we're always going to remember that. And I think it's just the tip of the iceberg, and it's going to make so many. It's going to have an impact on everything. On everything. When I think about doctors, specialists, when I think about engineers, when I think right on the job, problem solving in crisis situations. In which ways can these chatbots or artificial intelligence, if it's leveraged the right way, in which ways can it actually help us in those different situations? I think that the sky's the limit when it comes to that. Of course, we have to do our due diligence, I think, as well. Like you said, we talked about privacy issues. We talked about what are we doing with the information. I know a lot of people are worried about the robots taking over the world as well. So there's some people out there like that, and that are thinking those things. So, but it's everybody's got different concerns, and like anything else, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we explore that fully in terms of how we want to use it, in the context that we want to use it, and to make sure to the best of our abilities that that it's going to do what we want it to do, and that it's not going to be any more than what we want it to be, but that it's going to be a tool that's going to have a positive impact on what we're doing and will allow us to evolve as human beings.
And I really believe it's going to have a positive impact. The title, again, it's artificial intelligence to streamline your teacher life. Teachers are leaving the profession in droves. Why? Because they're overworked. And that whole idea of they need this tool to kind of take away all those onerous tasks that are a part of teaching and to allow them the time to do the things that they want to do to keep the kids engaged in the classroom. So, that's the reason it's there. And let's hope
And
these stop leaving the profession because we need us.
I think that's a really important point that you brought up. I don't know how it is in New York, but I know here in Ontario, Canada, we have a teacher shortage. I think it's everywhere. The amount of times that principals have to go into the classroom because there's no teachers, and different situations. The amount of times where teachers working as instructional leaders at this systemic level it has had to go back and be placed in a classroom because we don't have classroom teachers. It's unprecedented. I've been in education since 1997, and I've never seen anything like what we've been seeing in the last 3 years, I would say. So yeah, anything that we can do and get that into their hands early on when they're in, we call it teachers college, but when they're learning how to become teachers and they're in the classrooms and practicing with mentors, the more tools we can leverage for us to to be able to regain some of that time and be less tired and less stressed. I think that's what we need to do, because you're right, we've got a lot of people that are leaving the profession and they're not coming back.
Yeah, and that is my hope. I think hopefully that's what this tool can be. At least if one thing it can help with.
Absolutely. But I think, what I can suggest to everybody that's listening, if you haven't done so yet, just go to the website, go to ChatGPT, and if you'd like, create your account and play with it. Ask it a couple questions, experiment with it, and just see for yourself exactly what it is and what it can do for you. And then from there, you can decide, if it's something that'd be good for you. But and have conversations with people that have used it as well. So and because a lot of people that haven't used it will also have opinions, right?
Mhm.
But I think it's really important to also go and get the opinions of the people that have used it and have experimented with it and is able to give like some, I don't know if it's credible in the sense that they've used it, so they know a little bit what they're talking about. But seek out the ones that are using it, and if there's nobody in your building, hop on Twitter, Facebook. There's a whole bunch of educators from JK all the way up to university that is using it, and that provide feedback and opinions, so for you to be able to form that. But I think it's good that people go in there and you can create a free account if you'd like, if you're willing to create an account and just experiment with it, right? Discover it.
Yeah. The best part is the conversations. Is even when you discover something and you say it to someone else who's using ChatGPT, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. I didn't realize it could do that. But wait, can it do this?" And back and forth you go. And the more you play and the more you talk, the more you discover that it can do for you. And it's
Yeah.
really amazing.
It's unbelievable. One of the examples that I hadn't thought of that came out in the conversations with the teachers is, could we leverage Chat GPT, for example, if a teacher receives an angry email from a parent and is
Yep.
looking to
My book.
respond, I'm not sure how to respond. So that's actually a question that you can ask the chatbot, right? How would you respond to a parent that said this in an email, and I want to be constructive, I want to be solution oriented. Can you generate some ideas, for me to be able, and you start from there, right? So that's just an example of, boom, mind blowing. I hadn't even thought of, using it in that kind of context, and it can be very helpful.
Yeah, you'll probably appreciate this little anecdote. Back in March, when I was writing the book, I chaperoned a field trip to Montreal.
Okay.
So we had a 10-hour bus ride,
That's a long
and
bus
I
ride,
was
yeah.
writing the book on the bus ride. What else are you going to do on a 10-hour bus ride? And my colleagues and other teachers that were part of the group didn't know what ChatGPT was. And so the French teacher came over and she was asking me what I was doing. And I explained it to her. She says, "Well, can it do this? Can it write a passage in French and provide me with, these vocabulary words within that passage and interpret it?" And I said, "I don't know. Let's find out." And of course it did. It did it beautifully. And she was hooked. She was hooked on it from that minute forward because it gave
Yeah.
her something that she didn't have in her teacher life that would help her job.
And that is a great example. And you made me think again with the conversations that we had in our school so far. Some of our teachers were saying how they could maybe leverage it with our students with learning difficulties, right?
Oh,
With
yes.
IEPs. So, and that's it's a big thing. If I've got a classroom and I've got 25 students, and within those 25 students, I've got 12 that have IEPs, and that I need to differentiate, I need to modify. that could be heavy, it could be very heavy. So, how can I maybe leverage ChatGPT, for example, to be able to give me ideas, or to be able to compose, different versions, or different versions of a text, let's say, so that it could be adapted to, the different students with their different needs in my classroom. So that's another moment where I said, geez, I hadn't even thought about even doing that when it comes to differentiation. And how can I be able to make sure that I'm meeting the needs of all those different profiles of students in my class, especially the ones that have IEPs and that have learning difficulties, right?
Yeah, there is a whole list of ideas in the book on, I did discuss with a lot of special education teachers this
Wow.
idea from both lenses,
Yeah.
like how can I differentiate materials in class, but also how can it support me in IEP writing and performance level statements about students. And going back to that guilt conversation,
Yeah.
I had one special education teacher I was working with, and she wanted to use the tool to assist her in IEP writing.
Okay.
And she was, but she had a tremendous amount of guilt. And she's like, IEPs are supposed to be individualized plans. I need to make
Mhm.
sure that I am meeting my students' needs and I am familiar with the student needs. And a robot isn't going to know this. And she called me late at night because she was really, really upset about it. She was like,
Yeah.
I'm using it and I feel guilty and I feel like I shouldn't be doing this. And I said, as long as you are using it, to support your own independent thought and to support what it is that you know about that student, and you're saying it's okay, it's there to support you, you're not copying and pasting, it's okay. Relax, it's okay. But it's a great tool for anything related to special education for sure.
I love that. Support your own independent thoughts. I think if we just keep that in mind, that phrase in mind that you just said, then we'll most likely always be using it in the right way, right?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. So listen, guys, if you're looking to get the book, I don't know, Mary, maybe you can show it
Okay.
for us for the people on YouTube. There it is, Artificial Intelligence to Streamline Your Teacher Life, the ChatGPT Guide for Educators. Mary Howard is the author. So if you'd like to get a copy of that book, of course, it's available on Amazon. However, we will be providing a link in our in our webpage, of course, for Mary. So it's going to be with all the other show notes. So you just need to go on down to inspireleadership.ca in the podcast section, and there will be a page there, a link. You'll just be able to click. It'll take you to Amazon. Order the book. It's a great book. There's some great ideas in there, from educators, by educators, for educators as well. So, get your hands on a copy. Make sure you buy the book, and go explore ChatGPT. So, Mary, it's been a great conversation, and I've got one last question for you before I
Oh
let
boy.
you go on the gloomy weather Saturday in New York and here in North Bay. So, Mary, for the people listening to us today, if you had one wish for them, what would be that wish?
One wish, and your listeners are going to be people that are interested in leadership.
Oh,
Yes.
a whole bunch of different kinds of people, but
Lots of different.
leadership, education, mostly, I would say
Yeah.
yes.
Well, under the lens of leadership, the best leader that I've worked for and worked under was a cheerleader,
Okay.
was somebody that, celebrates the accolades of anybody in the building. And so if I had one wish, it is that you have a cheerleader in your life, because those are the people we need. Life is hard. We all work hard, and when you do have success, it's always nice to have somebody there, to celebrate that success and not be jealous of you and not be like, oh, sure, they did that, but, really, truly be just there for you in those moments. I guess
Absolutely.
that's my wish.
I love that. That's
Has nothing to do with
beautiful.
ChatGPT, but
Yeah. We all need cheerleaders, and it's so important, the people that we surround ourselves with. So we want to make sure that the people around us are the people that are supporting us, people that are pushing us to go
Mhm.
further, but also the people that are celebrating us as well. So I think that's a great piece of advice, Mary. Thanks for that. Mary, if our listeners would like to get a hold of you, in which way can they go about to do that?
Lots of different ways. You can email me at yoursmarticles@gmail.com. And I'm on Twitter. It's Mrs. Howard 118, which is my room number. So there's not 118 Mrs. Howards. This is my classroom number.
Okay.
I'm also on TikTok, Mary Howard 118, and it's really there that I share all sorts of ChatGPT things. That's a great place to
On
go.
TikTok.
I'm not dancing. I'm
Mhm.
sharing ChatGPT
Okay.
things. There's no
Maybe
dancing.
eventually.
No, there's no dancing.
Nope, she says no dancing. That's
No
great. So
dancing.
that's great. Thanks, Mary. We're gonna link all that up once again in the show notes. So for people listening, once again, head on down to inspireleadership.ca in the podcast section, and we'll have all those different ways that you can contact and get a hold of some of Mary's content. And I'm sure that if you have any questions, you can reach out to her, and it'll be a pleasure for her to be able to help you out with that.
That'd be great. It was really wonderful talking to you. Thank you for
It
all the
was, Mary. Thank you so much. Thank you for reaching out. And I'm so happy. Like I said, it was timely. And I needed this conversation. I needed to have this conversation with you. We're talking about it in our school board. So, I really appreciate you. I appreciate the book that you put out. I appreciate, the support that's giving, different educators around the world and the future ones that are going to get their hands on their books. So I really appreciate you. And thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you.